Hi everyone. Today, as we continue to think about how we as writers can write within the informative genre, I'm going to teach you about how to research by finding and using reliable sources to gather information. This is so important when writing in this genre because when you're writing and giving information about a certain topic, you want to make sure that you are finding information to write about that topic from sources you can trust and sources that will give you true factual information. So what we're going to be thinking about today is when you are researching and looking at different sources, how do we think about whether that source is one we can trust to give us true information, or one that might have some biases or different things that would show that it's maybe not the best place to be getting our information. So we are going to look at a few different resources, and we're also going to think about what we want to look at when we're checking out those sources to determine whether that source is reliable. So to do this, we're actually going to first check out some criteria that are important to think about as you're looking at different sources, whether these are print sources or online sources. So taking a look at our chart, this is a chart you can use when you're thinking about what sort of resources to find for any type of information you may be gathering or collecting. The first thing we want to think about are the type of source that we are checking out and trying to get information from. Examples of some sources that are usually credible: official government websites, institutional sites that represent universities, agencies that regulate different things, such as different power companies or different things for different towns, governing bodies, and respected organizations with specific expertise that are well known. Other trusted sources are peer-reviewed journals. So a lot of times when you go to libraries, you even checking out a library website, you might notice that they'll have a database with different journals that have academic articles that are peer-reviewed and will have a lot of citations attached. Those are usually credible, also reputable news sources. Examples of some sources that are not as credible would be blogs, web forums, individual or business websites, materials published by an entity that might have another motive and might be biased, such as a group that is looking to sell something, and so might want to sway you on a certain topic one way or the other. Thinking about all of that, again, we said so trusted or the most reliable type of source would be official websites, institutional sites, or academic journals. It's possibly reliable if it's published, but we would have to check out the other criteria on our list here to determine if it really is reliable. Less reliable would be an unfamiliar website. Another criteria we want to look at when we're checking out sources to see if they're reliable would be the author's background. So if it's an expert in the field that's giving us the information and you're able to look at the source and find some information about the author, then that's the most reliable because we know they probably have a wide range of experience and knowledge with the topic. If they're educated on the topic, possibly reliable, but we'd have to determine the kind of education they received and how much background they really have and experience to give us the information we're looking for. And least reliable would be a website or source that is uncredited or that doesn't even give an author's name, because that would be hard for us to determine who exactly is giving us the information and where did they get it from, and then therefore is it true. Another criteria we want to look at is when it was published. So if it was recently revised, it's probably the most up-to-date. A lot of times information pertaining to different topics will change depending on the current research that has been done. So if it's recently revised, it's probably the most reliable. If it's outdated, like over about 5 or 10 years old, then it's probably isn't containing the most up-to-date factual information. And if no date is given, then we cannot be sure when exactly the information was published, and therefore whether it can be a source we can rely on. Another thing to look at is the depth of the review. Often peer-reviewed academic journals are reliable sources because they'll contain a depth of information on the topic that really shows their expertise. If it has good public response, it's generally reliable, but again, it depends on are the people reviewing it, do they have knowledge on the topic? Least reliable would be controversial reviews, because then it would most likely be a source that has some degree of bias in it, where the people responding to that source about the information are split on the topic because it was leaning one way or another in a way that might not be backed up by facts. Another thing to look at is the sources that are cited. If citations are referenced and give other well-cited works that we can then check out to see where the information that the source is presenting got their information from, then it's most likely one that can be trusted. If it has credible sources that you can check out, then possibly reliable. But specific citations are a little better. Least reliable would be if no sources are cited. Again, like if no specific author is given. One last criteria that is important to look at would be objectivity. The most reliable would be a source that gives balanced, neutral information, where they're helping us to see both sides of a situation if it's some of the information could possibly be controversial. It's possibly reliable if it's sponsored. Again, if it's sponsored by a certain group, then there could be a motive that could be causing them to present information in a certain light. Least reliable would be if it's clearly biased. So those are some things we're going to look at as we check out some sources today to determine if they are reliable or not. And so the first thing we are going to look at is in the previous lesson, we had a list of questions we still had following thinking about and brainstorming how would you survive in a windstorm. So just thinking about these questions that we still have, some big topics that stick out to me is what we would need to do to prepare for a power outage, and how to stay safe in the event of a tree falling or power going out. So I'm going to look at some sources that can hopefully answer some of those questions for me. But first, when I go to those websites, I'm going to check out a few things to see if those sources are reliable and credible. So the first website that I found was the RG&E website. That's Rochester General and Electric, so they're a very well-known power company within the city of Rochester. And checking out my first criteria, so the type of source, I know it's a well-known company, and it's been around for many years, so it's definitely a well-known source. Author's background, since I know it's a power company, I know they have expertise on the subject of power and knowing how it works and how it would be affected in a windstorm. Thinking about the date that the article is published, so the article I found on this website was actually published on April 4th of 2017, so very recent, within the last year, so that's good. The depth of the review, when I read through this article, I saw that they not only give information about power restoration priorities, but they also tell what is important to consider to be safe before, during, and after the storm. So it seems to me like the information given there is pretty in-depth. And I checked to see about sources cited. Oops. And even though sources are not cited, there is contact information. So if I wanted to find out maybe where they got some of their information from, there is someone I would be able to contact, which is good. Also, objectivity. When I read through it, it seemed very balanced, neutral. It wasn't an article where they were trying to sell me anything. They were just giving facts about what was important to you to stay safe. So overall, I would say, based on the criteria on our chart, that this is a very reliable source to answer some of my questions. Another source I checked out was one I found through the Seattle government website. So just looking at my chart again, it was an official state website. So that's a good sign when looking at the type of source. I did not, however, find an author. So that was a little concerning because I don't know who wrote the piece, and I didn't see any citations about where they got the information from. I also did not see a date when it was published. The depth of the review, it seemed pretty good. However, it didn't seem, again, no citations, even though it was, when I read through it, pretty objective. So that was a little bit more mixed in terms of reliability. It definitely hit some of the things on our chart in terms of criteria that would make it reliable, but there are also a few missing. So I'm not sure if that's the most reliable source. One other thing that came up when I was trying to search for this information was some information on Yahoo Answers, how to prepare for a permanent outage. So just looking through this website and looking at my criteria, it was a little unfamiliar. It also, there wasn't one author, it was kind of whoever wanted to contribute. So I didn't necessarily know if the people contributing were experts in the field or not. They weren't giving their credentials in their posts. The date that it was published really ranges. One posted 6 years ago, one posted a link to something from 10 months ago. So it really ranged. So in terms of reliability, the dates range and weren't that reliable. The depth of the review, there did seem to be a wide range of opinions, and I wasn't quite sure the background of some of the people giving those opinions and the objectivity. So overall, I would say a website like this, where it's kind of a forum, wasn't the best place to be getting my information, because really anyone could be contributing, whether they have expertise on the subject or not. So one thing to consider too is that sometimes websites that are not reliable will look like a regular website, but will actually, if they don't hit the criteria on this chart, or most of it, they are most likely not reliable. So those are a few different things to think about as you're determining your sources. It's important to always consider this when you're gathering information to write on a topic. When you are gathering information, one final thing to think about is the information something that you can point back to a source that can be trusted? So that's always something to consider. Now, one thing that you guys can try for next week as you're starting to gather information for your informative writing piece is looking for websites on your own, and I will post the link to the chart I used, and you can check it out and use that as a way to determine if the sources you are picking out for your informational writing are reliable. So thanks guys for watching, and good luck with your writing. Bye!